Welcome to Trust and Obey with Chuck Frank. We're studying the Book of Ruth, and today we're going to be studying chapter 3, Ruth's Redemption Assured. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself. Put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies. And you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do." And she said to her, "All that you say to me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, Do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Also he said, "Bring the shawl that is on you and hold it." And when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "Is this you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, "These 6 ephahs of barley he gave me. For he said to me, 'Do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" Then she said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day." Now we'll have a word of prayer, and as you can see on the slide, it's a picture of Washington praying before going into battle, and his quote, "It is impossible to rightly govern a nation without God and the Bible." And our founding fathers are so regularly dispatched as racist slave owners and people of low regard, and they are the exact opposite. And they were all believing people. And so I want to read to you a prayer from George Washington's prayer journal. "O most glorious God, in Jesus Christ, my merciful and loving Father, I acknowledge and confess my guilt in the weak and imperfect performance of the duties of this day. I have called on thee for pardon and for forgiveness of sins, but so coldly and carelessly that my prayers are become my sin and stand in need of pardon. I have heard the holy word, but with such deadness of spirit that I have been an unprofitable and forgetful hearer, so that, O Lord, though I have done thy work, yet it hath been so negligently that I may rather expect a curse than a blessing from thee. But, O God, who art rich in mercy and plenteous in redemption, mark not, I beseech thee, what I have done amiss. Remember that I am but dust, and remit my transgressions, negligences, and ignorances, and cover them all with the absolute obedience of thy dear Son, that those sacrifices which I have offered may be accepted by thee, in and for the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, offered upon the cross for me. For his sake, ease me of the burden of my sins, and give me grace, that by the call of the gospel I may rise from the slumber of sin into the newness of life. Let me live according to those holy rules which thou hast this day prescribed in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy holy word. Make me to know what is acceptable in thy sight, and therein to delight. Open the eyes of my understanding, and help me thoroughly to examine myself concerning my knowledge, faith, and repentance. Increase my faith, and direct me to the true object, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. Bless, O Lord, all the people of this land, from the highest to the lowest, particularly those whom thou hast appointed to rule over us in church and state. Continue thy goodness to me this night. These weak petitions I humbly implore thee to hear, accept, and answer for the sake of thy dear Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, let's now drill down into chapter 3, because you'll always be the Moabitess, the second-class citizen, the pagan foreigner. And Ruth determined that she was going to go and provide for Naomi. And Naomi could not see a path to anything good happening. And in fairness to her, unless widows had assets, most of the time the only way they could make a living was either begging or prostitution. And so this is heavily on Naomi's mind. And she's saying, you know what? Shouldn't I be doing something to take care of your security, to make sure you're settled? And now she's going to lay out a plan. She says, now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Winnowing barley is the last stage of the harvest of the barley, where they go to a threshing floor. It's a flat space on top of the highest hill on the property. And they take winnowing forks and they throw the grain up in the air, and the chaff and any light stuff, the breeze takes away from the edge of the floor, and the grain falls back down. And that's how they clean it up and get it relatively purified. And then that's what they take for themselves and whatever they're going to sell. When the threshing, the winnowing of the barley is finished, then they have a big feast to celebrate that the work is over for that year, for that crop, and there's lots of eating and drinking. There's also an overtone of lasciviousness because it's men and women who have been working together, And now they're all celebrating and they're eating and drinking, and occasionally things get out of hand. So there's some risk and some danger in Naomi saying to Ruth, therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself. She's saying, bathe and put whatever perfume or anything that smells nice on, and put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. So she's to stay out of sight. She's not to participate in whatever frivolity is going on. And Naomi says, then it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do. So she's going to creep in very softly once he starts to fall asleep, and then she's going to uncover whatever his robe is over his feet. She's going to lift it up and lie down and put it over a part of her, and then wait. And Naomi says, and he will tell you what you should do. And she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. She has no knowledge of any of this. She doesn't really understand the concept of a kinsman redeemer. And that's who Naomi is saying. He's our closest relative. He's our kinsman redeemer. And in the ways of Israel, in Naomi's case, her husband died. And so his name and Elimelech's name is going to go away because there's no male child to carry it on. And so the kinsman redeemer was somebody from the family who could do two things. One, buy the land that Elimelech had so that Naomi will have some assets to live on, and marry, in this case, Mahlon's widow, and that's Ruth, and hopefully she will have a child, a son, and then he will carry Elimelech's name, and the name will go on. So this was their institutionalized safety net if people were widowed. So this is what Naomi's hoping for, and she is pushing the envelope by having Ruth go down to the threshing floor, which could turn into a party with debauchery or whatever. And Ruth's response is simply, all that you say to me, I will do. It reminds me very much of when Mary is visited by the archangel who informs her that God has chosen her and that she is going to have a son, even though she's a virgin, and the son is going to be the Messiah. And all of this for Mary was incredibly dangerous, because for a young girl to end up pregnant while she's betrothed to someone was an extremely bad circumstance. And if Joseph was not the person who did that, then her neighbors would just take her and stone her right in front of the house, and she'd be dead. But her response was, I am the Lord's servant. So Ruth is doing something very risky, and she says, all that you say to me, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly, quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And this is a picture of Ruth and Boaz. Doesn't really capture the moment from the Bible, but it's stylized by a great artist. And here's a picture of a threshing floor, that it's up high on the hill and the breeze is coming up from the water. and there's a curb around it, so they want to keep the grain in, and they want all of the chaff and discard to be outside. And then they sweep all that up into one pile and then bag it. It says, now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? So she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. Then he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. So let's take apart that. He immediately exclaims, blessed are you of the Lord. You're a gift from God, my daughter. And he's saying this because he's very old, and she's probably around 25. And by her basically asking him to become the kinsman redeemer and marry her, she is first taking care of Naomi, because Boaz is wealthy. And this will mean that Naomi will have means, not only from the sale of the land, but that Ruth will inherit what Boaz has. And so she's blessing Naomi with her unselfish choice. She's blessing Boaz with her unselfish choice, because he's very old, he has no wife, he has no children, and this is a late chance for him to have some happiness. And so it's a blessing for him too. And she's blessing her late husband, Mahlon, because now there's a chance that if God blesses them with a son, and he will, that Boaz's name will go on. And so he sees all of this, and he sees that from all of these actions and the verbiage in this book can determine that Ruth is a pretty significant young woman, that she must be attractive, but then what's really attractive is her virtuous nature and her integrity. And so he's just blown away that she would come and make this request, and it would be a blessing for so many people. He says, and now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. So everything that Naomi was afraid of for Ruth, that she would come there and the people would ostracize her and treat her as a pagan, and the Israelites did not like the people of Moab, and it just could have been very bad. And instead, because of Ruth's character and the way she comports herself, everybody can see that she is a woman of substance. He says, and now it is true that I am a close relative. I am a candidate as kinsman redeemer. However, there is a relative closer than I. So there's someone closer in the dichotomy of the family. And he says, so stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. So he's saying he has the first option on this. And the option is that he has to have the means to buy the land that Elimelech left. And so that asset will go to Naomi. And then he has to be prepared to marry the widow, Ruth, and to try to have a son with her so that Mahlon's name can move forward. So he has to agree to both things. He can't cherry pick one or the other. He says, let him do it. So we get the sense that Boaz is motivated and wants this, but he is such a person of integrity that he will only do it the right way. And so he's basically saying, this other guy is in first position, and I'll go to him, and I'll find out if he wants to do this. And if he does, then I accept that as God's will. And he says, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as the Lord lives. He's saying, so I just want you to know that if the other guy says, no, I'll be the kinsman redeemer, then I accept it as God's will, and you'll be provided for. But if he doesn't, then I'm swearing to you as the Lord lives that I will do it. And he says, lie down until morning. And this is another stylized picture of Boaz and Ruth. And here it depicts Boaz as quite an elderly man. And in the Jewish writings, they say he was around 80 years old. And the artist painted her like somebody in their early to mid-20s. He says, so she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another, meaning right before the sun comes up. There's this little glow, but it's not really light, enough light that allows you to discern, but you can make out shapes. And then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Now remember, this book was written 3,000 years ago. It's one of the first 5 books of the Bible. And they did not have a sophisticated use of pronouns or anything back then. In our speech, it would have been, do not let it be known that you came to the threshing floor. But instead of you, it's written probably by Samuel, the woman came to the threshing floor, meaning Ruth. Also, he said, bring the shawl that is on you and hold it. In those days, every woman had a shawl. She'd cover her head with it. She'd cover her shoulders with it if she was cold. But she would also use it like we would a grocery bag and hold the 4 corners and hold things in it and then swing it over her shoulder or even tie it over her shoulder with a knot at her neck. He says, and when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. So Boaz and Naomi have been communicating with this barley. In the first chapter, he sends 2 ephahs of barley with Ruth after the first day of gleaning in his field. And that's 10 gallons of barley. And Ruth was thinking, maybe I'll get enough for us to have dinner and maybe a light breakfast the next day, because they hadn't eaten. They had been on a 60-mile walk. So now she shows up with enough barley to cover them for probably 6 days. And now he measures out 6 ephahs, which is like 30 gallons of barley, and laid it on her, and she went into the city. But those 6 ephahs mean something symbolically, and Naomi picks up on it. So when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, meaning Naomi said, is that you, my daughter? Again, this is sentence structure from 3,000 years ago, translated. In our vernacular, it would be, how did everything go? But she says, is that you, my daughter? And this is just a reference back to Ruth 2. It says, may a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So what they're saying is that Ruth has not only left her land and left her family, but she's left her gods, her pagan gods. And she is now going to worship the one God of Israel. And that's very impressive to the Jews. Not only that she would commit to taking care of Naomi, but that she's committing basically to becoming a Jew. And so Boaz says to her, may God give you a full reward for your generosity. And he describes it as the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. And wow, is God going to provide for her? He's a very wealthy man. She's going to have a son by him. And that son, whose name is Obed, becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse's the father of David, who will become King David, the greatest king in the history of Israel, and the direct line to Jesus Christ. So it's an absolutely amazing story as it unfolds. And this is a diagram of ancient weights. Down at the bottom here, it calls out ephahs and seahs and omers, and it's an interesting thing to look at. And this is a picture of Ethiopian hulls of barley after it's all been cleaned up on the threshing floor. It's greatly magnified, right? The barley is not a huge grain like that. Those almost look like ears of corn. Okay, back to the Bible text. Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me. For he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. So the communication that's going on between Boaz and Naomi with these gifts of barley. The first gift from the first chapter is Boaz letting Naomi know that he thinks Ruth is a prize, that she's fantastic. And he sends that message, and Naomi gets it immediately. This 6 ephahs is basically, 6 is a very important number in the culture of the Israelites, because God said he made the earth in 6 days. He worked for 6 days, and he rested on the 7th. By giving the 6 ephahs of barley, he's saying to Naomi, I'm going to work on this, and I'm going to get it accomplished today, and then we will all rest one way or the other. And Naomi gets it immediately. And then she said, sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out. For the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day. So Naomi gets the message of the 6 ephahs. She knows he's on it, and he is going to finish it this day. And she's saying to Ruth, you stay here with me. You don't go out. You don't interact with anyone. You don't do anything that could queer this deal. Okay? We are going to sit here until we hear from Boaz. They're very close to a solution that is going to have huge importance even for us. Because without Jesus Christ, there would be no Christian faith. There would be no Bible studies. We wouldn't be doing this 3,000 years later were it not for that. So we're going to have our final prayer, and there's a lot to pray for. This past week, I had Hurricane Milton visit me. In fact, sit on top of my house, and I spent 5 hours in a closet in the dark with what sounded like train tracks on all 4 sides of my house with locomotives just nonstop running. It sounded like a war outside. There were things hitting the roof, hitting the windows. I taped them all up with duct tape, done everything that I could, but it was a very serious hurricane and ended up just getting power yesterday, a week later, and gave me a lot of time to reflect. And the hurricane is the least of our problems right now. Our country is on the precipice of implosion, and Satan is just having a field day with our government and our leadership, and God's in control of this whole thing. And so that time in the dark closet gave me a lot of time to think and to pray. He says, be strong and of good courage. Anytime that God says this stuff repeatedly, the emphasis is 10 times more each time. So this is like hearing it 30 times. Be strong. Don't be weak. Don't be afraid. You have to trust in me. Trust that I'm in control of everything. You're not. So don't project what an outcome is. Be strong and of good courage and move forward with that kind of faith. Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid. It's another command. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. What does that mean? Be sad, depressed. The only reason that you're sad and depressed is if you have some expectation that things should go the way you want them to go. That's not what we do. On a day-to-day basis, we seek God's will, and He will put opportunity in front of us, and He will put things for us to do, and we have to do those things. We don't project what we want, okay? So the only way that you have dismay, that you have disappointment and depression, is if you have some expectation. But if you're turning all this over to God, because He's the one who can handle it all, He's the one who already knows how everything's going to end up, then that allows us to be strong and of good courage, to not be afraid and not be dismayed, pressed, disappointed, or sad. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Thank you so much for studying this third chapter of Ruth. We have one more chapter, and that will complete the book. It's a wonderful book. It is full of lessons, and every time you go to it, you'll find more and more. God bless you.